Hello and welcome to another edition of Milwaukie Beat. My name's Dave Hedges and with me today is Dion Shepherd, who is the chair of the Historic Milwaukie Neighbourhood Association and also of the Kellogg's Good Neighbour Committee. And it's the Kellogg's Good Neighbour Committee we're going to talk about today. Dion, I expect many people in Milwaukie probably haven't heard of the Good Neighbour Committee. Let's start by, can you explain what the Kellogg's part of the committee is?
Sure, Dave. The Kellogg Good Neighbor Committee is a committee of representatives from neighborhoods, and we're a committee that was established by the City of Milwaukie with an agreement with the City of Milwaukie and WES. And
WES is Water Environmental Services.
Correct. It's the waste treatment plant in Milwaukie. The committee was formed in 2013, and they're made up of representatives from two neighborhoods, the historic Milwaukie neighborhood, the Island Station neighborhood, and we have a representative from the downtown, and then we have a member at large that's also a business owner at the south end of town. You may already know this, but the committee was actually formed with neighborhoods that were adjacent to the wastewater treatment plant. Mm-hmm. So those people that are probably the most impacted by WES are those people that are on the committee.
And the Water Environmental Services run the Kellogg's wastewater treatment plant, which is just off McLaughlin Boulevard between McLaughlin and the river.
Correct.
The plant, I think, was built in 1973 and has been a source of continuing problems in Milwaukie for a long time. Can you explain what the problems were going back over the last few years? Sure.
I've only lived in Milwaukie 15 years, so the problems have gone back farther than I have. But when it was initially built, it was built with the technology from the 1970s. And since that time, I don't believe that some of the upgrades have been made to that plant that have been made to the other plants in Clackamas County. But the predominant issue is odor. There's a really strong odor depending on the winds, depending on the weather, and it primarily affects the neighborhoods adjacent to it. When I say adjacent, I mean the neighborhoods to the south, which is Island Station, historic Milwaukie, which is to the north, and then, of course, the downtown, the south downtown is affected by it. And then with the Riverfront Park, which is being revitalized, that area is also impacted. Mm-hmm. But having said that, in the 15 years that I've lived there, it's gotten better. I know they've addressed some of the problems, but they still need to do more.
Yeah. What actually is a Good Neighbour Committee? I know the city's had them in other areas as well, but what does a Good Neighbour Committee hope to achieve?
Well, kind of what Good Neighbour means is making the waste treatment plant a better neighbor for the community. When the agreement was initially signed, it was to establish a committee that would look at what could be done at the plant to improve the community. And we did that in a number of ways. I can go into a little bit more detail about the committee itself and its funding, because that's probably one of the questions that's going to come up.
Yes, because I'm sure people will be interested to know how the committee is funded, and we might be surprised to find out that everybody in Milwaukie pays a little bit towards the funding of the committee.
Yes, they do. What's interesting about this committee is that it actually has money, which I think is unusual for most committees. We don't actually have the money ourselves, but what we've done since we were first established was that we looked at what could the West do to improve the neighborhood. And what they did was they established funding source. And there's actually two, I guess I would call them two pools of funding. One is that they established a fund for odor only, so that it can only be spent for odor. and that's $1 million. The second fund, which you mentioned that everybody pays into, is $1 per household, and that goes into a fund that Wes also manages, and that household fund comes up to about $10,000, almost $11,000 a month.
Yes, that's $1 per household
$1 per household.
month.
Right.
Yeah.
So that $1 per household per month goes into a fund, and they actually established that fund in mid-2012. And from 2012 until our committee was formed in early 2013, that money has been accruing. And so once the committee was formed, what we did was we looked at what Wes had done in the last 2 years. They had hired a consultant to assess what the operation was doing, what improvements could be done, and they had done that for 2 years in a row. And when the committee came in, we didn't feel that we had enough information to make a determination on how we could spend that $1 million, that separate fund. So what we did was we made a recommendation that Wes hire a consultant to take that report one step farther, and that's to have a recommendation on where the different areas in the plant, what could be done to improve the operation as far as odor. And the process for that is that the committee makes a recommendation, then it goes to the city council in Milwaukee. They approve it or not approve it, and then it goes to Wes, and then Wes approves it or doesn't approve it. So that was the first thing that we did when we got together as a committee. Then in the meantime, while they're doing the studies, we also took a look at the plant itself, the surroundings, and one of the things that both neighborhoods felt was important, as well as the downtown, was the appearance of the plant, the landscaping. We felt that it needed better landscaping. And one of the other things that we ended up doing was that in changing the landscaping and adding more trees, we also could potentially affect the way the winds come in from the river. They did an analysis where they mapped the winds. And in certain times of the year, it comes off the river. Sometimes it comes from the south, sometimes from the north. And so part of the screening when they did the landscape design was to put plants along the west side of the plant to buffer the wind so it comes over the plant. And so right now what we've done is people have driven by the plant. What they'll notice is a lot of new trees, a lot of new shrubs. So the intent is to screen the plant and also to help with how the wind comes in and affects the odor, the dispersion of the odor into downtown.
The $1 million that you mentioned, that is money for Wes to spend entirely within the plant itself.
Right.
Has any of that money been spent yet, or on improvements on the plant?
Actually, it's been spent, about $100,000 of it's been spent to finish the studies on the odor control. And what we've actually done is last fall, we completed the last part of that study, and on our behalf, the city hired CH2M Hill to finish the study. And what they actually did was they went back to the plant, and based on the information that the other consultant had done, they measured the odor in different sources to come up with where we could spend the money and have the big bang for our buck. So the recommendation that the Good Neighbor Committee has made to the council and to Wes is to cover the aeration basins. And of the $1 million, there's around $900,000 left. And I believe that the project to cover the aeration basins would be about $1.3 million. So we are a little short, but Wes has put that project on their capital improvement list, and we'll know probably later this summer where it is as far as on their list of priorities.
Good. You mentioned the planting of the trees, and I'm sure people who go past the plant, whether driving or walking, would actually have noticed that a large number of trees, well, I say a large number of trees, have gone missing. Can you explain why the trees that were there, some of them were removed?
Sure. altogether, there was 60 trees that were removed. Part of it, about half of the trees were the result of our project. The other half were trees that Wes needed to remove that were inside the fence line. And for people that have driven by or walked by there were some trees that were, I guess, considered hazard trees. And so altogether, there was 25 trees that were related to our project. But the other side of that is that we're planting 250 new trees and about 1,000 shrubs. Most of them, 90-some% of them, are native trees and shrubs.
And how much is it costing to plant the trees? Are they going to be small trees or big, mature trees?
We actually tried to plant trees that were, in some areas, large trees. Altogether, we're spending a little over $200,000 for the landscaping, and that includes adding irrigation. And one of the things I probably need to explain is a little bit more about how the funding works to pay for the landscaping. But for anyone that walks by or drives by, I think you'll be impressed by how it's going to look. We also removed some invasive trees and shrubs along the riverbank, so that opens up the views for people that perhaps were concerned about the new trees taking away from the views.
And the money that you have to spend, is there a restriction on where you can actually spend it? Or must you spend it within a certain distance from the plant?
Yeah, the agreement with Wes and the city stipulated that it could be spent 200 yards from the plant. So when we initially looked at what we could do to improve, or actually have Wes be a good neighbor, was the landscaping, but it also is what the city used for the local match for the grant to start Riverfront Park. Mm-hmm. And when I say that, is one of the initial decisions we had to make early on was that the city asked us to consider using $1 million of that $1 per month EDU fund, if we could use that towards a grant, because the city was applying for a grant with the Oregon Marine Board. And the Oregon Marine Board grant required a significant match, which is $1 million. And so we voted for that on that, and we agreed to do that. So what is happening with that is that the city went out and borrowed money for that $1 million, and the Kellogg Good Neighbor Fund, the $1 per EDU, is the fund, the source to pay that loan back. Mm-hmm. So every month we collect $11,000 a month, and of that $11,000, a pretty good chunk of that is going to be going to pay for the $1 million grant for the loan. The rest of the money that we actually have in that fund is what we have spent for the landscaping. So once that money goes to pay for the landscaping and the loan for the Riverfront Park is due, then that'll limit how much money we have left to spend from that $1 per EDU.
And how long is the agreement with Wes for the $1 a month to be paid into the fund?
25 years.
And how long will it take you to complete the landscaping?
The landscaping will be done in June of this year. Mm-hmm. And then depending on how much money we have left, once the loan starts to get paid out, we may have to wait a while to accumulate more money into that account to have more money to spend on other projects. One of the other projects that is on our list is to perhaps add some lighting to the backside of the plant. Mm-hmm. And then also, early on, we had some discussions about possibly improving the path. There's some areas of the path that need to be fixed.
Mm-hmm. That's interesting. So the trees that are being planted, can you explain a little bit more about how the trees will be used to deflect the odor? Because the odor comes from within inside the plant.
It does.
And the wind that you described coming off the river obviously will be on the other side of the trees. Are you able to sort of give us an idea in layman's terms?
Okay.
What the trees will achieve?
Well, it's kind of like a windbreak. If the trees are large enough, what happens is the winds come off the river, the winds come off the south, and they would actually go up above the trees rather than go through the plant and disperse the odors through the downtown or the neighborhood. There's a lot of trees that have been planted on the south side. Predominantly, that's where most of them have been planted, and then quite a few on the west side and the east side. The west side along McLaughlin, that is more for screening. On the south side and on the west side, it's to deflect the winds so that it'll actually come up over the tops of the trees rather than going through the plant.
Mm-hmm. And is there a noise issue from the plants as well?
There is. We haven't really spent a lot of time talking about that or doing any kind of analysis. Our priority for the first 2 years being on the committee has been the odor control, which has been that study, and then the landscaping to do the screening and also help with the odor.
Okay. And the council appoints a certain percentage of the committee. Do the neighbourhoods get to appoint their own representatives?
Yeah. The neighborhoods, both Island Station and Historic Milwaukie, select 2 individuals to represent the neighborhood. And then those individuals' names are submitted to the council, and then the council approves them. The downtown representative and the member at large, I believe they're just volunteers. Mm-hmm. And then the council does the same thing. They appoint them to the committee. Mm-hmm. And there's, when we were first established, we had 1-year terms and 2-year terms. And so now the 2-year term people are coming up. So there's 2 of us that are ready to either change or continue. And
is there anything that other people can do to help? If they're going past the plant and happen to notice a rather pungent aroma at that particular time, is there something they should do?
Yes. There's signage around the plant with a phone number they can call. It's like a hotline number. And that phone number goes to Wes, the Kellogg treatment plant. And then they track the calls and they try and identify where the odors might be coming from, if there's a particular problem. And then some of that information comes back to the committee so we can talk about it. Mm-hmm. And it helps them identify, if there's something unique that happened. They're really good to work with as far as letting us know that, like they did some work last summer, and it released at least some odors, but at least we knew about it because they let us know ahead of time. Mm. So.
Well, thank you. I hope that people have a better understanding now of the problems that have been down at the plant and what's been going on to rectify them. I know people have campaigned for some time for the plant to be removed, mm-hmm. but I think Wes have made that perfectly clear that that is not something which is an option for us to have done. So this seems to be a very good way of spending small sums of money from each person, which collectively make quite a large sum.
Well, for people that have lived in the neighborhood, especially Island Station and Historic Milwaukie both, the plant has been a very contentious topic. Mm. For years, there was a project, I think it was called a Clearwater Project, and it was a project where people got together and they were trying to find ways to remove the plant, relocate it. They stopped doing some of the upgrades to the plant because of the contentious nature of the whole thing. And so this agreement with the city and Wes is a big step. And I think that, I know that right now they're not going to see a lot happening, probably till next year when the trees start to grow. And Wes, hopefully by then, will have made a decision on our recommendation to cover the aeration basins. Mm-hmm. There is one other project that Wes is looking at that's not really coming from the Good Neighbor Committee, but when the consultant did their analysis of the different areas that Wes could focus on for odor, one of them there was actually 3 of them that were related to called dewatering the plant. Mm-hmm. Yes. Right now, that facility is not doesn't use that technology. And what that really means is they pour the sludge into the trucks, and that's what gets hauled away. Yeah. And dewatering it would actually take that water out. Instead of 6 or 7 trucks a day, it would go down to 1 truck a day. So if Wes does that, if that's a project that they pursue, then potentially that will be a big cost saver to Wes. And also it'll be an improvement to the community because we won't have those trucks going back and forth every day.
Yes, and I understand that when they're actually loading the trucks up, that's one of the sources of the odours when they're connecting the hose pipes up to fill the trucks up.
It is an odor source, but it's not the odor source that people smell all the time. It's not the one that you smell when you walk down by the plant or drive by. It's kind of just one of those things that's intermittent, and then it's not there anymore.
Well, thanks, Lee. And I hope people have a better idea now why, if they go down by the river and see the work going on around the plant, what it's for and what it's trying to achieve, and supportive of what you're trying to do. Thank you very much.
Thank you. You're welcome.
So how can you help us in making the programme? 2 ways. We need a small group of volunteers who are prepared to come along and actually help make the programme, work the cameras and the other equipment at the studios. You don't have to worry if you don't know anything about it. I don't either. We can all learn together, we can all have some good fun doing it, and we'll all have another skill set to add to our list of knowledge. The second way is you can tell me what's going on in Milwaukee. Do you have an issue in your neighbourhood that you would like to promote? Do you have something going on in your neighbourhood that you disagree with? The Monroe Bright Greenway might be one of those issues. Are you adamantly against having a road set aside mainly for the use of bicyclists and pedestrians? Or do you support the idea? We can make a programme about it. We can make a programme about anything in Milwaukee that you like. If you'd like to be a part of the making of the programme, or you have suggestions for items that we can make programmes about, please contact me, Dave Hedges, dhedges@wfmcstudios.org, and we'll see where we go with the ideas. And the volunteers, we need you now. Thank you very much.